All right. Rick Thompson and Bob Miller from ACT Labs are here to start us off today.
Along with Jamie Lowell.
Yep. And we'll begin things by paying homage to our great sponsors.
Jazz Cabbage Cafe is sponsored by the Botanical Company, Redemption Cannabis, Real Leaf Solutions, the Detroit Nutrient Company, and GrowGreenMI.com. Along with
420 Promotions.
Right.
I think custom 420 Promotions.
I believe it's custom 420 Promotions too.
Yeah, very cool. We're gonna work with them next year too. They will. Here they go. There you go, man. Right there.
Yes.
Work with them well into next year. They will be all over all of our stuff. But we're a month away from redoing that. So that's my excuse for right now. But anyway, I'm glad that Bernie's here. There he is. He understands. All right. Well, hey, we have Bob Miller here with us, and we're going to talk about what's going on in the world of cannabis lab testing. There was quite a massive recall of flower and, conditions for having that material returned to the marketplace, and a lot of people trying to meet those conditions and get back on track. And so we're assuming that the labs are pretty busy, maybe anyway, but with this on top of it, it's got to be pretty ridiculous right now. So we'll talk about that kind of stuff and just what's going on in general in the world of testing. Any other thoughts when Paul Tylenda joins us? I do kind of want to know. I know Rick's looked it over, so have I. And Rick's put out a few bits of information of interest from the complaint against the state from Viridis Labs after this went into place, and we'll talk about that a little bit, along with Attorney Paul Tylenda when he comes on. And there's some interesting / curious things in there, and we'll just try to get an idea of what the suit's about and what's going on. And last week we got into, Paul was with us again, and we were talking about some people finally getting some of their property back that had been seized. Rick, can you hear me right now? No, he's gone. Okay. It looked like he was fading. So that went pretty well. He's coming back again and talk about this, and I'm looking forward to that because it is interesting to have so much revealed, and you wonder what the strategy is by almost admitting to a bunch of stuff, it seems like, and just interested to find out what comes of it first of all, and what we think some of the strategy is going to be from that. But I guess we're going to wait for Rick to come back on and have a better connection to talk maybe a little bit more about that, as well as Paul Tylenda. But Bob, since you're here, let's just get right into it then. That makes the most sense. What is happening at the lab, and without getting into like details of your thoughts on what's going on or why or whatever with this, just the actual consequences of such a massive recall taking place.
Yeah. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, it's been a very interesting couple of weeks, and just some massive change. I think customers are really struggling to try and get their product either retested or tested. And I think associated with that is laboratories being able to scale up to be able to support that. And so, at ACT Laboratories, we're trying to bring in people from other states to be able to help us, because we do have trained people from other states coming in to help us do testing. But it's a pretty massive undertaking and a very, very dynamic environment today. I think the MRA at the same time is trying to get sort of ahead of the curve with how do we get the samples, if they do need to be retested, how do we ensure the seed to sale system is able to accept them? How do we make sure we can handle the samples, and how do we report it back? So there's been literally changes occurring every day with the intention of trying to get product onto the market or product that's been tested previously to get it retested. So it's been a very, very dynamic environment.
I can only imagine. Paul Tylenda has joined us, and we're going to talk about a few things, but certainly get into the complaint against the Viridis complaint against the state, and just some what's going on, what we can discern from that publicly. And of course, I spoke. Bob here is from ACT Labs. If you haven't met before, us attorney Paul Tylenda. Bob Miller is
Bob, great to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Runs the labs for ACT Labs, and just mentioned that in this bizarre time when there's lots of things being considered and possible consequences from what's going on and all that kind of stuff, that's understood if Bob or representation of a lab or any other business wouldn't maybe get too involved in some of the specifics of the information, just to not get into any sensitive areas on record or anything like that, in case you end up involved in something down the road, just how things may turn out. And that's just wanted to point that out there, that we're not expecting expecting to get too deep into an analysis to the point where it might be too much for the time right now. Just so even though you might have a lot of expertise and could answer some questions about that, it's just going to be understood but contribute, of course, as much.
I've got
as little as you want on this, but go ahead, Paul.
I was going to say, Bob, I've got a question for you. Where did my note go? In terms of Viridis is allegedly arguing that their scientific methods in the laboratory have been approved, and that those methods are, I believe, arguably because they are the approved methods, that means that those methods are thereby reliable. Can you maybe shed some light on the concept of how universal some of the testing is, how transparent some of the testing is, and how commonplace would what Viridis is alleging applies to other labs? And that is to say, do all labs have essentially a transparency part that the state can come in and say, we've seen what you've done, we okay your process, we approve what you're doing, and you're following the appropriate guidelines? Or is there something that is enough to say, okay, yes, you're approved, but it doesn't mean that you are following a process every time the exact same way?
Yeah, great question. So actually, Michigan is one of the more advanced states. We operate in 5 separate states. And actually, Michigan is one of the more progressive states, I'll call it, in that the methods that you can use in the state, every state, you have to have the methods approved by the regulatory body. But what Michigan has gone on to say is not only do you have to have them approved by the regulatory body, but you also have to have them recognized as an AOAC approved methodology. So it's an independent group of people that kind of get together and say, what is the components of a methodology, and is it AOAC approved? So all laboratories have to do that. And I think, Paul, what you're really, the more finer line is, you could have an approved method, but are you routinely following that method as written? And is that
correct?
Method therefore? So that's the pieces and the nuances that I wouldn't be able to be privy to, but to be able to say, okay, methodologically, is the method been approved? And I'm making an assumption that in this particular case, Viridis has an approved method. I'm making that assumption. The real question, as I'm understanding, really becomes, well, is that method being followed appropriately every time? And is there appropriate documentation to support its use on an ongoing basis? Yeah,
I was going to say, in my mind, that kind of sounds like a simple question. Is it scientifically reliable?
Correct. And when you look at a methodology like microbiology, it has so many nuances to it, right? It's a quite complex type of tested and methodology. So many of the parameters are very, very critical to ensure accurate and reliable data. So this becomes even more poignant when you talk about microbiological methods, because there's a bit of art to them as well as science. So being sure that whatever you've registered with the state, ensuring it is validated and meets all the criteria of AOAC requirements, and then the state requirements, then you have to say it has that appropriate detail that you can ensure it's reliably being run every time in the same manner.
Looks like we lost Paul, but totally understood your answer on that. Might have to fill him back in on it a little bit when he comes back. But Paul, did you catch most of that?
Sorry, I got disconnected.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much you were there for, but it's maybe it might bear just a little review if you don't mind, Paul, just so.
Yes, let me. Your audio is a little funny to me, Jamie.
Okay.
Oh, let me try something.
Yeah, well, a few of us are having a hard time today. It looks like everybody except for Bob. Bob, can you hear us? Everything okay? Okay.
Hear you loud and clear. Yep.
So,
yep.
Did you? I mean, I don't know how far you caught of what your Paul's answer. I mean, I'm sorry, Bob's answer to you, Paul. And okay, so he was having a bad connection, I think.
Yeah.
Well, he could always watch us again if he never makes it back. Rick tried. He chimed in just for a second. It looked like he was about to make it back on. So sometimes we have days like that, unfortunately, when we're broadcasting like this. But we can kind of get back onto. Here's Paul again. Let's see if this works, and then if not, we'll kind of continue on. How's that? That looks.
Oh, that's
great.
You were a little robotic sounding to me. It was kind of terrifying. Nice. But I did, Bob. I did hear your answer, and the question I guess goes back to is that shouldn't it be easy through retesting to determine if the first test was done correctly and follow the procedure? And that is to say that if the second test picks up what they're alleging the first test missed, then isn't that proof of either A, their methods weren't being reproduced, or that perhaps there's another issue?
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, acknowledging the fact that the microbiological testing is somewhat variable, and we're talking about plants in general, but I think you could infer that, right? That if you just look at the body of data and say, if I have a data set and that data set gives me a certain outcome, and then I test that same set of products either in another laboratory, test it again, and I get a very different data set, you would infer that there's something there that's at best inconsistent.
Inference by subtraction, right? So it's what's missing is gives us the indication of what was done. Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
And that's part of it. Now, the interesting part for me about the lawsuit is that the first, so on the complaint itself is 60 pages without exhibits. A lot of the exhibits are emails, correspondence, other such communications, and even another lawsuit that was filed. The part that sticks with me the most about the way the case begins is the lab is ultimately complaining that the government is picking on it. And it sounds a bit funny coming from the people that used to do the picking. And ultimately it's from, they're complaining about, oh, you're only picking on us because we're the big boys. You're only picking on us because we're so successful. And you're only picking on us because we're so large. And damn, if I had $1 for every time I had a client say that, because that's exactly what these state troopers were doing for most of Prohibition, and certainly through the medical laws, was shooting first, asking questions later, picking on people because of the way that they appeared. And whether or not there was substance to that, that was at least the first complaint, was you're picking on me because of who I am, because of my size, because of what you're afraid I can do. And the first 2 pages is Viridis tooting their own horn. I mean, let's just say, the first 3 pages are about how amazing they are. It's very self-congratulatory and self-inflating, and about how they do so much of this, and therefore, because they're so big and so sexy, that they must be a target, and the targeting must be unfair. That because they are so large and so successful, that they couldn't have done anything wrong. Furthermore, because our processes were approved, that means that we couldn't have done anything wrong. So there's a lot of, classic arrogance in their approach, rather than, and this is exactly what I figured from the very beginning, is that when you have a situation like this, the first inclination is to go on the offense and talk. And that's what they did. Viridis is making all these claims, all these statements about themselves, about the industry, about the way the MRA operates. And there are certain things in here that I saw as conclusory towards your own self-interest, right? It's the same effect as you write a complaint. You're just like, we're the best, we're the biggest. Because we are the best and the biggest, therefore we are a good target. And it really is the way that McDonald's used to complain about, we're the biggest fast food industry and we take the most lawsuits. Well, yeah, you're the biggest kid on the block, you're going to take the most fights. That I don't think is appropriate here. I also find.
So, but Paul, just to clarify, like, and people have told me this in conversation also, that it would seem to make sense that the largest player on a particular license and a regulatory scheme would get more scrutiny from those who oversee that scheme, because they're participating in it more than other people are. So there's nothing bizarre about the attention that they got from the state.
But I guess I bounce that back and say, are the largest retailers and the largest growers complaining in the same way? They're subject. If they're
Well,
the
I don't
biggest
think
boys in the
bounce
block.
back. I think that helps to confirm that there might be an issue. I mean,
Yes.
there's some
And
bounce back in this particular case because there's something to be defensive about.
Well, and the defensiveness to me is the PR hit, right? Viridis is saying, "Oh, we're the biggest, we're the best. You took us, you went after us, ultimately to knock us down a peg." And to me, that kind of sounds like the starting of the admission of being too large. Hey, we control 70, or we're doing 70% of the testing in the state. Is that by accident, by coincidence, by incentive? And that's something that I think they may have opened the door for unintentionally, because I think some of these, what they're alleging in here, could or should warrant further investigations to be like, okay, you allege us in the suit. Let's discover that, right? Let's go through that, even though that one paragraph and that maybe that cluster of paragraphs doesn't have anything to do with the actual prejudice that you're claiming. You might, again, just like to promote yourself through your own lawsuit, right? Or by pumping up your chest and saying, hey, we're such a Goliath that we must be picked on because we're so large. We're too big to fail, right? But even as you walk through the complaint, I think the real issue of did they follow the process appropriately to get the appropriate results is what they're pushing back on. And they're saying, oh, well, no, we did because you were here and you told us we were doing it right, or you didn't object. And, silence is not approval, especially in this situation. And it gets into a lot of these representations made by the government saying, oh, okay, you're approved, this is okay. And I don't know if the reliance on the individual's opinion is enough to create problem for the state. So, I mean, it's
And aren't there other
in one
motives?
sense that they're like, I'm sorry?
Under these circumstances, I think you may even started alluding to, there's other motives for putting a complaint like this out. So, right after this happens, in order to help back up the claims to people who are their customers who are concerned that they're really okay and they're going to get through this. And,
exactly right. Exactly right. It really is strong guy pushback, which is, lawyers have different philosophies on battles and the like, but with uncertainty, is it always the best to speak first? And with that, are you providing certainty for, let's just say, against your own interest, right? And that's my biggest issue here is Viridis. Are they saying too much? Are they exposing too much?
That's what Rick and I kind of thought on an initial glance, and Rick actually mined a few of the really kind of curious things out of there, and got some of that information out for people to assess for themselves.
Oh yeah, and it's very like to say that this document is written with the pen of arrogance is an understatement. I mean, this is very, this is written by lawyers who believe and love themselves for clients who believe in and love themselves, with little room for anybody else's opinion. And I appreciate that. That's the job that you're paid to do. But your duty is to tell the truth, right? You can color it, but again, maybe it's my industry PTSD from dealing with the government time and time again in these situations, that you wouldn't necessarily help them do their job. Coming from helping the government do their job all the time, that might be this lab's biggest problem, is that they're outing themselves they're speaking too soon. They're disclosing too many secrets too fast. And it'll be interesting too with the way that they, they're saying, hey, we passed all your tests. And then of course you can plead inconsistencies without being afraid of it. But then they're going to say that they want a declaratory judgment that the microbial rule and log rule are procedurally and substantively invalid. Essentially saying it doesn't matter that the rules about microbials, if we didn't apply, we passed the rules for microbials, but it doesn't matter because they're invalid. So again, I mean, that's decent lawyering to plead inconsistencies to cover all the bases. But it starts to, the body starts to stink the deeper you read, right? And that's, again,
is that getting out ahead of stuff that's going to be on record and coming out anyway? Is that part of that philosophy?
You know what? Potentially, yes. And that's the other side of this, is could this be a form of damage control in advance by alleging these things that we're so great and we're so wonderful? I mean, it's a funny approach if it is. But one of the conversations I had with one of the bigger players in the state, the first assessment was, okay, so the lawyers are going to have a good Christmas. And that's really what, we were there a little bit before, but now when you have the big boys, the big players, the big money, and the big law firms, the billable hours that it would take to put together a 200-page suit and a 60-page complaint it's just funny. Something doesn't sit right.
I agree. So it seems kind of desperate to me. So, Bob, one thing I kind of wanted to ask while you were here, and while I'm thinking about it, I will. Last time you were on here, one of the issues that was going on was the reliability of a certain method for detecting microbials, like something like QCPR or something like that.
Correct.
And one of the questions, I think I may have asked you during that show, but I'm still curious, is that a method that just isn't a good fit for what needs to be known in this context? Or is it a methodology that needs to be refined in order to be a good fit for the type of data that's needed?
Yeah, I think generally the technology, I mean, every technology that we have has its pros and cons, right? So, a qPCR, the big aspect that qPCR has, it's not left up to interpretation. You get a number. It passes or it fails. There's very little left up for interpretation. So that's the positive of the methodology. It also, I use the analogy of a hand in glove. It's very definitive. So you're able to go and say, if I get a hit, there's a really good chance that you could feel pretty confident whatever you're testing for when I say you hit a positive result.
Mm-hmm.
That you've gotten that result you got is indicative of what's in the product. So I think the methodology, when it's run consistently and appropriately, can generate very, very reliable data. So I think at the end of the day, what was happening back then, I think we've moved beyond that aspect of the unreliability we were having when we spoke a few months ago. That's gotten has improved, and we've gotten AOA's approval of the methodology. So it's been taken through its paces, and therefore is when it's run consistently and appropriately, it will generate reliable data.
Bob, can I ask you, what would be, let's say, a standard deviation of one lab to the next in terms of THC results, right? Is that going to be 5%? Is it going to be 1%? Will it be 10 to 20% in terms of a variation?
For a potency test, are you saying?
Yes.
Yeah. So a potency test, 5% in my mind would be sort of typical from a deviation perspective. Yes.
Okay. So that would be, let's just say if I had one product test the same, or three labs test one product, that the variation across that should be no greater than a 5% variant in potency.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Now, can you tell us why that is? Why is that 5% okay, and why does that exist if all of the labs are following the same testing?
Yeah. So if you take a potency methodology and look at its contributor to variation, there's a few different ones, right? One is inherent to the person doing the test, right? Just human nature and the equipment variability. And equipment variability, if I test the same solution over and over and over again, you'll get about a 1 or 2% RSD. That's sort of standard for a chromatographic procedure, what we're talking about with potency. So that's the first source of variability. What you layer on top of that is the sample variability, that I'm not testing the exact sample again. So when you do that, that's the edited phenomena that will take you down to about 5%. We have our own criteria in-house that we use to really lock down our methodology to get consistent, accurate. We always talk about accurate and precise data. So we have our own criteria that we use if we're going to test the same sample over and over again in our laboratory. We're expecting to get a number lower than that as our variability.
Now, if you were getting, or if a lab was getting a 10% higher read, and they claim it's based on their procedures, based on what we know of the process, what could lead to that 10% increase? Is that operator? Is that machine? Is that manipulation of the sample? Is it manipulation of the gassings or the testing procedures?
Yeah, if you kind of look at now what contributes, right, there's really 3 steps to the process. I always look at analytical methods and very compartmentalized. There's the chromatographic procedure that actually is the one that actually allows the separation of the various cannabinoids. That's, for the most part, the industry is pretty much aligned with that. You don't see a lot of variability there. There's the sample extraction process, i.e., I get a sample, how do I get that analyte into solution? That will absolutely vary from company to company based on their procedure. And then how you sample the product becomes the other contributor itself, right? So those 3 in their own individual sets will all contribute. The lesser one being the analytical, the actual chromatographic method. That's very little source of variability.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
Because I think that's always the issue is to, the rumor was go to this lab and you'll get a better reading. Well, yeah. What are they doing?
Yeah, and if you believe you would expect if I were to test in laboratory A and laboratory B, you would see that you would have a normalized variability, i.e., sometimes we'll be lower, sometimes we'll be higher. If you see a laboratory which is consistently higher, consistently lower, that's very suspect because there's something systematically being done differently. And that would be the piece that, in my mind, that would raise up my warning signals to say there's something systematically different, either well-intended or not so well-intended, that may be contributing to that difference.
So when we talked about this, I think Sunday night, we did a special broadcast to bring people up to date. Paul participated with that with us. It was brought up that one of the issues here could be that there isn't consistent standards that everybody uses or is mandated to use, and that maybe we should all be looking to use the international standards. Cass, Coleman, who I believe you've met from Carbodex, was certainly, and our COO for that company were suggesting that. What are your thoughts about that?
Absolutely. The one thing that we lack in the cannabis, I came from the pharma industry. The one thing we lacked is a recognized external standard, right? In the pharmaceutical business, we have something called the USP. The USP, and it's the United States Pharmacopoeia. They actually create a set of standards that say, I'm going to get this material, anybody can buy it. This will have an assigned purity for anybody that uses it. Now, what we're understanding is USP is starting to get into the cannabis business. They're not there yet. So they do have a set of standards that they're using, but they're qualitative standards. They're not quantitative standards yet, but they are moving towards a set of standards. We're also hearing other groups are starting to look at the same thing because they see that as a specific lack of having those standards. But it would really help drive greater consistency if we had a common set of standards, without question.
I just saw an article, I think it was yesterday, about California trying to
absolutely
do just that.
Absolutely. And I think it would really help us all. What we do is we actually create our own common set of standards that's consistent across our network. So we have one set of standards made by one person that does them for our entire company, because it's very much also technique dependent. So
I'm sorry, is that how the higher, I mean, could, like another lab choose a standard, and that standard could result in a higher THC number? And that's
without question. Okay. Without question. Yep. So we try to derive that consistency, particularly when we're working with our customers. If they're using laboratories, we really like to align on one set of standards. So we're always measuring apples to apples, but absolutely, depending on what standard you use, we've seen, because when we selected our standard at ACT Laboratories, we looked at about 6 or 7 different standards, and we continue to look, and we saw variabilities upwards of 10%. So a 10% variability across standards is not something atypical, but we've really narrowed down that variability by using the same set over and over again, at least the same source of standards.
So how can something be regulated without a universal standard? It's sort of like saying that all marijuana must be green. We're not saying what color green. We're just saying it's got to be some type of green. And in this way, it kind of sounds like we're not saying that there's a standard, but we're just saying that marijuana has to pass some kind of testing, and the testing kind of has to look like this. So it doesn't have to be exact.
I asked another lab person this, and not to derail or anything like that, but just, for perspective and what's important, in my opinion, when you're talking about contaminants and the things that could cause an issue, potentially pesticides or something like that, that's pretty straightforward. Everybody can do that, right? And that's really where it's important, is the fact that people are so concerned over this specific THC number is adds to the absurdity from my perspective. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Paul.
No, yeah, no, go ahead.
Go ahead, Bob.
No, I think one way you could absolutely do it, right, is to get a company to manufacture the material. That material then could be tested in a multiple set of laboratories in a very controlled way. And then you'd be able to say, based on this data set, this would be the purity of that material. What's done in the pharmaceutical business is the USP actually goes to the innovator of the drug and say, you just give me material of ultra pure form, and we're going to create that standard. That's going to be called 100% pure. So they actually work with an innovator. Now, obviously, in cannabis, we don't have that capability, but you could do that through a consortium of people. And I think there are some companies. ISPE is one we've heard, ASTM. There's other groups that are now, they see the gap in the process, and they're really trying to insert themselves to try and create such a capability, which I think will really help the industry to ensure greater consistency across different laboratories. There's another process, right, and that's just be able to do performance testing, where you could send out material, and the Michigan State does that, where they take material and they send it out in multiple laboratories and say, what do you get? So it's another way to do it. It's a little bit less accurate than what I'm referring to, but at least it's a step in the right direction to start to drive consistency.
So you're saying that essentially the state does an average.
Correct.
So that would give us, again, that standard deviation of that range of, let's say, acceptable.
Yes. Yes. And one of the things that we push for in every state that we do business, right, is every state has bad actors. We know that, right? And what we were really trying to work with the state on is give these samples in a very blinded fashion. Don't tell me you're about to test me, because if I'm a bad actor, I'm not going to do the bad act today, right? So build in a process whereby you could have that material sent to my laboratory, and I wouldn't even know that it is this. And so if I'm behaving in an inappropriate manner, I'll never know the difference, and that will become much more magnified. So that's one of the things we're trying to urge any state. We've actually tried to partner with states to create round robin testing protocols that say we would all benefit from it, but it really needs to be blinded. So I don't know what's coming to me that I should be doing this with my best chemist and following all the rules, because if I am a bad actor, because I know it's coming my way.
Bob, I'd be curious to hear how, because in my mind with this issue, it seems like the recall was the last straw, and from the reports there were that the MRA gave Viridis the chance to do a voluntary recall and then take essentially the steps before they said, no, we're forcing this recall, we're making this happen. In terms of dealing with a recall like this, can you maybe give any insight as to how a lab should act in situations like this going forward, or how can these types of events be avoided? Because again, this seems like it was more mess than needed to be, because now we're dealing with the fallout rather than dealing with the issue.
Yeah, and Paul, I don't know the complete issue myself, but just kind of talking in very general terms here, right? What we do business, and I'd like to think that all labs like ourselves, our job is to create accurate, reliable data. Our ultimate outcome is to ensure when that product gets tested by us, the data we generate is accurate, reliable, which to me is all about ensuring the safety for the customer, right? That's our job. It will always be our job. The point that caught my attention in the recall letter was aspergillosis, right? And aspergillosis, I'm not a medical doctor, but aspergillosis, I'm a pharmacist as well as a PhD chemist. But aspergillosis is a problem, right? So when you're starting to deal with microbes potentially in a product, you're really now sort of, in my mind, crossing this line, and now you're really potentially creating safety issues. That's really a big deal. And in my world, again, taking my hat off where I am, but and being 35 years in the pharmaceutical industry, we never played around with safety and health. Never, right? That was always the line we would never go across. And you always have to be very, very ensuring that, hey, the patient's not impacted. So in my mind, without knowing the details, in my mind, when you're dealing with something like this, you've got to be incredibly cautious, because now you potentially could be causing risk to a patient, which is just, just unheard of, right? You just don't go there.
Is this, and what you're touching upon sounds like again where we are now, which is a product's liability issue, which is if I get the aspergillosis from your product, I would have a remedy against you and your insurance company for giving me the faulty product. Which is, no one wants that. No one wants to be in that position, because that again has the same effect as a recall.
Yeah.
But with worse PR. Because now you're going to have, which we never had before, now you're going to have somebody who is actually harmed by marijuana. And that's not the type of PR that the industry needs.
Absolutely agree. Yep.
It's unfortunate. But maybe that's the point. Maybe there is no concern for the industry in these actions. Maybe there's, again, avarice and self-concern, and we're going to do it. And being the biggest kid in the playground, no reason to not be. So let's defend that position. But that's the nature of business sometimes. To do what's best for yourself, regardless of outcome. But it'll be interesting. I understand that there's a hearing tomorrow on this, in the Court of Claims that the MRA has responded to the lawsuit. I'd be curious to read that and see what their responses will be to some of the interesting positions that are taken. Because a lot of it's going to, the state's not going to have any knowledge of.
I don't know. Cliffhanger. I'll have to wait for Paul to come back and say that.
Yep.
Here he is. He recovered, but we didn't hear the.
Can I ask you, Bob? Are you experiencing any backlash, any deeper questions, or any fallout from the lab issue?
No, not from a backlash. I think if anything, it shines the light on the importance of doing good analytical chemistry. So from my perspective, it's not. You never want to play with people's health, right? So I'm going to diminish that. But I think it brings back into the forefront the importance of quality and compliance.
Can you see me and hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Yeah. So we haven't really heard any backlash other than, in my mind, is just refocus the importance of quality and compliance, right? And refocusing, re-emphasizing what we do is so critical to ensuring good human health. So not really backlash per se.
Well, he'll make it back on, but I think he got that one for sure.
Yeah.
Not really backlash.
Well, I was going to say, did you hear my question, Bob?
About backlash?
Yes.
Yeah, I maybe didn't hear me, so I'll just repeat it. We haven't really seen any backlash per se, other than bringing the importance of accurate, reliable testing to a laboratory to the forefront again, which is I don't have any concern about that, right? That's what we do. So I think it just almost reinforces, re-emphasizes what we do is so critical to ensuring safety and health of the patient. So to me, it's nothing negative from our perspective, and not really heard any real backlash. But now people are paying attention, which is It's not such a bad thing.
No, that's the thing. I imagine you're getting phone calls about how are you different? What are you doing that's different? You're not doing that what they are you? That
yeah.
Surface level. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Good. Man, education is one of the most important parts about this industry, and it sounded like a lot of these people were either being, encouraged to go to a certain lab based on results, or part of the deal was they had to have their stuff tested at that lab in order for it to be sold down the line. But apparently it was no secret.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about trying to fix this issue by using a universal standard, and it was in the discussion that we had before on Sunday, or people suggested in the comments that the international standards would be something to look for. Is that something you also agree with?
Absolutely, Jamie. Yes, absolutely.
That's, again, enhancing scientific reliability, knowing that, hell, if McDonald's can make the same hamburger across the world, why can't we test pot the same way across the state?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's in everyone's best interest.
Yep, absolutely.
How much, let me ask you this, Bob, how much of, and I know we talked about this on Sunday, Jamie and I, with Abco Labs, we talked about, let's just say proprietary approaches, or the secret sauce that they put in, that every lab does something that's, their own trade secret. How much of trade secrets right now are possible in the testing process? Like how much of, we don't have to tell you that it's proprietary, can be the answer to some of the exploration?
I as a person and working in the quality space, to be quite honest, if somebody were to say to me, I can't tell you how I'm doing it, I'd be very scared, right? Science is science, right? And there shouldn't be a lot of secret sauces here, honestly. So when I hear people say that, well, I can't, and we've had customers that tell us, well, geez, are you going to give us our data and share the raw data with you, or show us how you did the test? I say, absolutely, we're an open book. Right, that you're paying us to generate data for you. So we're an open book. And when I've absolutely heard in Michigan as well as other states, well, that's not something other labs will do. I tell them all the same thing. And I'm not here about win in your business, not win your business. If somebody said, I'm not going to share with you, I would have immediately have a red flag. And we're here to show you the science we do. And we continue to learn, we continue to enhance, we continue to get more and more accurate, whatever we can do to do that. And you're here as a customer, we'll share with you what we do. Right. So it really shouldn't be a lot of trade secrets. When I hear that, I get very concerned.
Because in my mind, the secret part, it's not based on universality or the generalness of the testing, right? Or let's just say the scientific reproducibility of the results based on the same procedure had gone through.
Absolutely great. Absolutely great. As an analytical chemist, without question.
Yeah, it's very odd that that's even an issue, right? Especially when transparency and the whole purpose of safety compliance facilities is to tell us what's in our marijuana. And when it's just like, well, we can kind of tell you, but there's some proprietary secrets involved in the process that we can't necessarily share. Well, that's business over regulation, which I don't think the state should stand for if they really truly care about the safety of marijuana. Now, here I am asking for more regulations, but this is maybe perhaps a clarification of the regulations because, again, like everybody else, this is the first real lab issue that's forced people to delve into the labs and to really peel back the onion in terms of what really goes on in the labs. And the one thing for me is I'm still kind of surprised that there isn't a universal approach. I'm still surprised that there's like, you make a cake with egg, flour, and water and everything else is up to you. That's a little frightening.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not reproducible.
Yeah. And we all, with scientific, overall of scientific thought process, we may be all slightly different, right? We may do something slightly different, but in general, the concepts are the same. And without question, if you were to give me a sample and give Laboratory B a sample, Laboratory C a sample, we should be getting, as we were talking earlier about within normal variability, we should be getting very, very similar results. You absolutely should, right? And when you don't, that's really when, again, the red flag goes up because you should be able to do that. And the science has advanced to that part that you should be able to do. There's not a hell of a lot of trade secrets out there to be able to say I could do this slightly better. You may do it a little bit quicker, a little bit more efficiently, but not dramatic differences. Not dramatic differences at all.
I'd like to get Rick to say a word just so that just in case he goes again, he will at least be able to say that he said something on this broadcast.
I hate the internet. That's my word. Oh, I've had such a difficult time connecting. I'm so sorry to have missed out. I'm sure it was a great conversation.
Yeah, pretty good.
Oh, I'll watch it in replay.
You were persistent this whole time. I appreciate it. Now it's working.
I had to go to the backup cam system, so it took me some time.
Yeah, still interested in some of the quirky stuff that was in the complaint, but I was kind of interrupted there. I think Paul just finished, but I just wanted to intersect. We're not talking about that at the moment, but please continue.
No, go ahead. I want to hear what Rick's got to say. Hi, Rick. Welcome back. Great to see you.
Hi, guys. I'm sure you probably covered a lot of this lab stuff already, Jamie, didn't you?
We did, yeah. But we didn't get into the specifics of the complaint other than, some of it's weird. It's weird that they're exposing some things or we're talking about maybe they're getting out in front of some stuff that they know is public record anyway. Or we talked about that kind of stuff. And
yeah, I just got to say, when I read over the appendix, all of the different addenda that they include in there, the letters from the MRA, that's where some of the most damning things are revealed. If cannabis labs are failing samples for aspergillus at a rate of about 9.4%, and one of their labs is failing samples for aspergillus at a rate of 0.7%, I'm going to say that from a scientific level, you're looking at something probably wrong on a procedural level or a methodic level. You're not. It's hard to make a case that this is just the MRA picking on us when you have such abnormal test results as this. It also contained within the complaints themselves were cryptic statements about the methodology used in the Viridis method, which is their special potency testing. And of course, I'm sure it's already been said, potency is not part of the current recall. It's all about microbials and potentially dangerous issues, not just something about whether we were accurately reporting a THC issue. But when they talk about the sampling and the sampling of how they take the piece that they're going to test, and how they have a special way of doing that, to me, that sounds almost like a favoritism situation. So I feel really bad that we're looking at a lot of people who are going to have a very difficult Christmas, to be honest with you, and a holiday season, because this comes at such an unfortunate time. But the fact that their samples, when retested, failed 6 out of 10 times for microbial contamination, that tells me that it was a justified recall. And I recognize that once a sample's been out of the lab, it could have been recontaminated at any time. And that doesn't necessarily scientifically 100% convincingly. Paul's getting in a rhythm there. I was expecting a little maracas in the background, but the fact is, still that's cause for concern. When we see a couple of different indicators like this, then I think it.
Oh no. Hopefully it comes back. But along with what he was saying, Bob, isn't it true? And there's a concern that stuff that's got to be retested is now subject to the fact that people were handling it and stuff like that. And there he is. You back? Maybe not.
No, but your point with Bob was that it has to undergo 2 retests, but there's no guarantee that it's in the same condition it was when it was originally tested. Yeah. So a positive or negative test right now really isn't definitive proof that there was any error on the part of the original testing laboratory. Bob, would that be accurate?
Yeah, it's a very complex phenomenon. You've got the multiple handling piece, which surely can have an impact, but now this product is aged, right? So some microbes grow very, very well. Some without oxygen will actually not grow at all or grow very slowly. So as a result of that, the fact that you're dealing now with a non-integral sample really, it's complexity, if nothing more, because you got a lot of different factors all occurring at the same time.
Right. Well, from a layman's perspective, when we read articles from Detroit Free Press or the M Live, we really just take the journalist's word for it, because many people don't have a science background. They don't know what the subtleties and the nuances are. So it's super important to get the journalism right. But not being a journalist, I can present any particular angle on it or emphasize or de-emphasize certain facts if I choose. But I think it's important to represent the whole issue here. According to the lawsuit, I don't know that this is correct or accurate, but according to the lawsuit, the Marijuana Regulatory Agency watched Viridis perform this Viridis method 10, 12, 13 times, and without halting them and saying, this is not your standard, your operating procedure that we've approved. It was only after a length of time that they actually took action. Now, whether that means their system needs to be fixed or whether they weren't going to take action until the remainder of the industry stood up and said, you have to do something about this because we're dying out here. I can't really tell you what the impetus was, but I think Viridis has an argument that they were correctly the assumption.
Come on.
That we're doing the
Come on back.
way it was supposed to be. Although.
So, I mean, the fact that the state let Viridis do this consistently over and over again, Paul, and and now we're questioning this. Is that I think, hey, Rick, are you back?
Rick. Rick, there?
I'm here.
Hey, Rick. I was going to say, I think what you're picking up on, Rick, is actually what Jamie asked about is.
Right. I was trying to clarify for him. Yeah.
Yeah, the MRA, let's just say inspectors or investigators who were observing these tests. I've got a handful of questions about that as to which inspectors observing which tests. And again, because in my mind, it's like if you have your inspector show up and that person is the one who does your annual inspections, right? That person's not a scientist. That person knows about essentially, let's just call it the MRA building code as it pertains to the MMFLA and the MRTMA. It doesn't make them an expert in the scientific process or procedure that the testing labs actually perform. So you could have MRA inspectors standing by watching you perform this test without it really being really knowing what they're doing, which could be a problem for the MRA. But then it goes back to something that Bob said earlier: is just because you did it 13 times in a row correctly in front of the inspector, it's the same thing as doing something right in front of your mom when she's watching. But then you go do it, on your own when no one's being watched. And do you have the level of integrity to perform the same way? And I think that might be the issue. And the other one might just be a size issue to say if Viridis is so large that, the inspectors came and watched their best lab technician do all the testing while the other 100 people in the lab aren't as good as that person. And there's some performance variables and not everybody's performing the Viridis method as stringently as your top technician. There's going to be some variance just by playing the numbers. And that's on Viridis. But it's going to be a big lesson. This is going to be this is the McQueen case. We'll be talking about this one forever, and it'll establish essentially some general rules moving forward.
So did they verify, did they see the method, the MRA compliance people? Did they see it and then go back and inspect it and then not do, or did they go there and they weren't doing that method?
They're just saying that Viridis is saying that they watched the method and ultimately approved it. So thereby, because they did everything under that method, it means it's approved. I don't know if it really means that they did anything other than show up and watch one person perform it. And now the other side of it is just because someone says, "Hey, that looks fine," we're getting now into this reliance issue. That is this an estoppel issue to say, does the person who said that it's okay have the authority to make that representation to bind the agency from where that person comes? And maybe that's the answer, and that's a big problem for the MRA, is that they had all these inspectors out there saying A, B, and C, and it may have not been consistent or the resulting truth.
Do we have testing standards in our laws, in the laws, or are they based in the administrative rules?
Bob, can you tell us that?
I didn't follow. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Where does the guidance come from? Where does where do the rules for testing come from? From the law itself or from the administrative rules? Is there the actual testing procedures spelled out in either of those?
Yeah, the testing procedure, they're not in a very definitive way. They really fall back to saying at this point in time they have to be AOAC approved methodologies. So that's how it's defined. It's defined that in order to do this testing, you have to follow using specific AOAC defined methodologies, and those AOAC methodologies even define how you validate the use of that method is appropriate in your own possession. So that's how they kind of dictate the requirements.
They're incorporating all of that by reference by saying our rules are these rules, just like they've done for fire code and for other definitions.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't understand if they're operating in a gray area or if they're actually doing something that is wrong and illegal, or maybe illegal is a little dramatic, right? But against the law.
Yeah, I don't have that level of detail to understand what the actual item is, other than looking at the lawsuit and trying to extract some information. But at the end of the day, I don't have that information.
I'd be curious to see the level of proof that the MRA has to go there and show, other than just the results. And I'd be also curious to see how the judge, in this situation, they're going to say, one side's going to say one thing, the other side's going to say something pretty different. And how is the judge able to sift through, other than, again, just through the simple testimony, but how is he able to sift through what is a scientific test, what's just the result of a rule, what was the result of someone's, the process and procedure of their job? Again, is this Viridis method something that is in their SOPs? Is it an integration of the AOAC standards? And I think sort of through this complaint, they might, and I think it's possible for both sides. I think the MRA and Viridis might pridefully walk into some traps, some booby traps, because this is a new issue. This is ultimately uncharted territory as to the relationship between this regulatory body and what they can say and what the agents of the agency can say to the other licensees. I mean, there's going to be internal administrative.
A couple people went out. So Spartan says that a suspect, the MRA, had competitors do the retest. That's one of the arguments that Viridis is making. That Viridis is saying that, of course, if you're asking our competitors, did we do anything wrong, they're going to take advantage of that.
Doesn't that just speak true to who they are, though? Like, as if that's what they would do if they were given a competitor's thing? Like, of course this would happen.
It's
that's
a projection
what we
kind
do
of.
in our cop shop.
That's exactly how I hear it. But isn't there? I've talked to other labs too, Bob. Is there's an expectation of maintaining an ethical standard. Are you kind of on an honor system, in a lot of the areas when you're testing, and so when they send you the sample, they are assuming that you're going to do it properly and offer proper results and not risk, the integrity and the scientific process and that kind of
but
stuff.
Unless it's an actual chemist doing these MRA inspections, then it doesn't fucking matter. Like, who knows? Like, being a bureaucracy agent of law, this is the issue, right? It's not created like that. And nobody really knows. We all just like take it for what it is. And it's on their science, right? So we just started, and I wish that Adam was here to be like, 20 years. But it's true. So the idea that this is really Laura's fault, maybe because it's an oversight that they don't have the correct people looking at it. But it doesn't make any sense, right? Like, and they like have a history of being shitty in labs, so I mean, whatever.
Right. Well, that's gonna hold against them. But you touch on something interesting, which is who can find this out, right? How do we know about these lab violations other than other labs, right? This is one of those things where other labs would be the only one to be verifying what this lab did because they're the only other ones that can perform the same standard. Lay people don't know that. I mean, unless we're looking at mold right on the product itself, but in terms of like the finer, again, at the microbial level.
That's how we used to do mold tests. I mean, that was the only way to get a test like that was through a microscope back in the days.
So there
labs.
Part of the process it does use a microscope to look at mold, right? And then there's certain standards of how much of it is within a certain space and stuff like that. There's a description of that being done in the complaint in a very bizarre, set of circumstances that resulted. Kind of could be an indication of how some of these things passed a lot more than they might have, or that they should have, I guess. Sorry, Josey.
No, I just think that there's Bob, in your facility, everyone that works in the lab, do they understand the lab process?
Yeah, absolutely. Or they wouldn't be doing testing for us. Absolutely.
Not the people working in the lab themselves. I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Like the people in management, the people at the front desk, the people that are there every day and see it. Could they define what is the proper way and what isn't? I mean,
No, you
I
would
don't
have
know.
to.
I don't
Yeah,
think so.
No, you would have to have a level of training, right? You would have to have a level of training and have a either training or scientific education to be able to execute. And this testing is really, at the end of the day, it's on the complexity scale, it's rather complex.
Right.
So as a result of it, you really need to have specially trained people and typically degreed people in that area that would really be experts in being able to execute, develop, and interpret data.
Thank you. And I'm thinking that like even people that see it every day and are living it and have worked there for 10 plus years couldn't differentiate it. So it's absolutely ridiculous to assume that a bureaucrat from Laura could do that, right? Like an everyday person. And I think that they knew what they were doing, obviously, that they were kind of getting got by. And this has been going on a year, according to that report. So how long were they even existing before they started with this controversy? Like, they're not an old lab, right?
The lab?
Yeah, when did they get launched and into the time when they started getting investigated for being shady?
I don't know for sure, but I think they've been around since like 19.
I mean, I'm glad that's not very long. Like a year or something?
Well, I mean, I guess I don't know for sure. I get, so could be longer. There's a lobbyist group that's associated with that organization too, who I've had a meeting with.
I mean, you'd think they'd have
more.
more.
That was a couple of years ago too. It might be the last couple of years that they got up and running. But I don't know for sure.
Rick's back.
Nah, man, he is not.
An illusion of Rick is back. That's going to have to be enough for people.
What does this mean for other testing labs? Are you getting more?
Yeah, sort of back.
Oh God, there he is.
So right at the beginning of the show, when Rick first lost contact with us, began speaking with Bob and about that very thing. Bob, if you don't mind, you mind giving a little overview of what how things are looking now with the massive recall in the air and the retesting going on and all that kind of stuff for labs?
Yeah. So I think across the laboratory network, I think most, if not all, labs are being asked to take on additional volumes just be able to either retest samples that may have been in the laboratory possession of Viridis or customers just wanting to have their materials retested. So there was this sort of wave of additional testing requests that have been done over the last couple of weeks. And that continues. And what we're trying to do, as I'm sure other laboratories are, bring as many able-bodied people. We have 4 other laboratories to bring other people that is trained in these methodologies and so on and so forth, so they could become more of a plug and play to be able to support the increased volumes. We're asking people to work additional times, as you might imagine, over the holidays and so on and so forth, to try and do the best we can to bring on staff. We're also looking at hiring staff, but that does take time. But there's this sort of a wave of a request I think most, if not all, labs are getting at this point to be able to support the business and make sure there's product back on the marketplace for patients.
Have you guys seen something of this magnitude in the other states that you operate in?
Not to this magnitude, no.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you
Oh God, I'm a talker. That's why I don't come on here very much.
could you? It's okay. You're going to have a chance to do a lot of it here pretty soon. Could you tell? I'm not sure you could tell conclusively, but could you tell likely that when a sample, a retest sample, was contaminated by mishandling at some point? Is there indications by what the amounts of things are, or whatever, that would be more likely the answer than it just being from the growing process?
I would say indirectly, right? That if you got specific type of organisms, some organisms are known to be more human related. So you would say probably they could have been done through additional handling, but it's not a very accurate science per se to be able to do that. But when we get organisms, we're often working with our clients to say, what that comes from water or that comes from human or whatever. We always help them to try and understand what the source might be. So there's some indirect ways to do that, Jamie, but not a direct absolute saying this is what it is.
Right. So, Bob, we're going to, in a minute or two, gravitate into some discussion of charitable opportunities for people in the holidays to help people out. And I do want to mention that, I'm not sure if you were aware or not, but we've been speaking with Jeff about working with one of our organizations, Glenn, Great Lakes Expungement Network, and ACT being involved in helping that organization out, which helps people get their records expunged. And Josey's trying to say stuff. Wow.
Jeff's A1 number one in community service. ACT does so much for. They did so much for legalization. I think they threw a party like once a month, every month for like a year and a half, and they do so much in terms of just offering. Hell, there was no testing in Lansing at that point, so I mean, I think that was cool in itself. They also are big supporters of Sons and Daughters United, Michigan's greatest nonprofit organization.
Yeah. In working with Jeff for the last couple of years, he's got a very soft heart, and he's obviously very committed to the cause. So I'd like to be part of it in any way I could help, in this, very much, partners with that at the same time. So
it's always good to see cannabis companies doing good. It's good for the community, and it's good for the places where they live, where they survive. And I think that ACT is a star example. I'm so excited to have you guys here. And of course, to have you on our team.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
So, Bob, before we go, what's on the horizon? What's something that's coming up legislatively or in the future for testing, at least here in Michigan, that you're familiar with, or anything to look out for?
I'm trying to think anything specifically in Michigan right now. Not much that I could think of legislatively, Jamie. We're always, and even before this, we're always talking about how we could ensure overall consistency. Round robin testing, those types of things are always things we're always very sensitive to, because again, when these types of things happen, like happened with Viridis, it impacts all laboratories, right? At the end of the day, not that we're doing anything that appears to be untoward, like allegedly be alleged for Viridis, but it just is a bad name to testing laboratories. So,
Paul, would that be like? I'm sorry to cut you off, Bob, but just to find out about it, would the making a universal standard, could that just come from within the rules, or do you think there'd have to be a legislative change to make that clear?
If the rules incorporate what the standard is by reference, like we were saying earlier with Bob, then they can add to those rules, because the rules are certainly easier to change than the law would be. I don't believe that the law itself governs the standard. I believe I have to take a look to see who specifically governs what would be a standardization of it. But if it's done by the rules, that can be done through the MRA. They can just do it through the approved process that they have control over, which is, I think, the smarter way. And I think that's likely in the works. The MRA is certainly going to step up now and do enough to avoid this from happening in the future and to prevent these accusations from being made, right? There's going to be a lot of agent education in terms of what they can and can't do, the parameters of their job, message consistency among the agents, right? So they'll come out and do what they can. And I certainly wonder if this is going to be a big enough event to get the legislature to act if they need to.
And I think hearing about inspectors, right? I think at the end of the day, again, going back to my days with FDA, it was rather routine that we trained inspectors, right? That they went back into those specific, technical groups and just said, what should I be looking for? So, in those types of areas, offering up to be able to do training of inspectors, right? Of things that you should look for and not look for, and things that what should raise the red flags and shouldn't. And some of this is so scientifically oriented to be able to do that. It's something we've done in the past. I've done my own previous lifetime. and just to be able to raise up that standard from an inspection perspective also.
So, all right, Bob, anything you want to make sure that we get in? Anything you want to add, leave us with?
No, I just that we're always here to help. I love these kinds of conversations to kind of brainstorm and anytime you want to have me come in and talk about something, I'd be more than happy to do this. This is sort of neat stuff. It's unfortunate on the circumstance, but at the end of the day, always try to demystify science a little bit. Be more than happy to do that at any point. So we offer that up always.
Well, I definitely appreciate that, and we will
That's
take
great.
you up on that for sure. And
Great.
we really appreciate the information today and letting us know what's going on and bringing us up to date. We definitely appreciate the community outreach from your organization too, and we'll definitely have you back on before too long.
All right. Sounds great. Right.
All right.
Thanks all for your time. I do appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
man.
Bob.
Okay. All right. Bye-bye.
And
I'm gonna
speaking
take
of
this time to
Glenn,
jump off as well, Jamie.
Okay.
I got some work to tend to. I
Sure.
appreciate it.
let me
Josey,
mention
great to see you.
let me mention to people though, Paul, that
Yeah.
we were speaking of Glenn a minute ago, and I just want to
Yeah.
give some recognition to you for being such a big helpful part to the
Glad to be
expungement
involved.
process. As you know, lawyers are needed, and you're one of them, and you're doing like just an outstanding job. So, and Josie's trying to say something, but she's muted.
Paul does all of Detroit. He is, if you have a case in Detroit through the Great Lakes Expungement Network, Paul is your attorney. He's the best, number one. He's the GOAT. So he has
I'm the red tape master.
Exactly. That's his given name, actually. But I thought Paul was much better as well received. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming. Like,
Always.
we
We'll talk
absolutely
soon.
couldn't do it without him.
It's a great cause. It's a great thing, and it's an exciting thing to be a part of. It really is. I mean, second chances for any reason, especially for the way it's a great insight into the way that we used to treat people here in the state, and now we don't. And being able to clear that out it's very rewarding. I'll tell you what, it's great. Glad to be a part of it. I appreciate always the time and the conversation, Jamie. It's been an honor. I really like it. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks a lot, Paul.
Thanks. Take
Talk to
care.
you soon, man.
Bye.
So, Paul Tylenda Law. You can find him if you need him. Covers a lot of ground. Helps people with their businesses. Helps people with criminal defense. Helps people get their records expunged.
Paul Tylenda. Wow. Did you see that? Look at this.
It was a celebration.
We got this from August Haas, and it says Sons and Daughters United on it.
Nice.
So it's
Well,
Giving Tuesday,
Yeah,
and
just- speaking of Sons and Daughters United. Oh no. And you're muted again. But jump into it. Let us,
yeah, let's just
we wanted to
get
celebrate
right into
this.
the wreck,
Yeah.
So it's Giving Tuesday. There's lots of great things going on in terms of all of your favorite organizations. I think Great Lakes Expungement Network is accepting Facebook donations. Of course, Sons and Daughters United is also accepting Facebook donations. Our friends at the Redemption Foundation have been doing a lot of really solid work. Another great option for Giving Tuesday. Giving Tuesday is marked in about 70% of all of nonprofits get most of their funds from November and December for the whole year. So what we get now is what we use to plan our budget for 2022. And this is realistic for most organizations. I know that there's a lot of really good places, and there's a lot of really cool ways to donate. If you're shopping this holiday season, make sure you're shopping on Amazon Smile. Select your favorite nonprofit organization. I know that there's a lot of really good ones registered there. My Compassion, which is a Michigan-based cannabis education nonprofit, is definitely registered there. I'm sure that Normal is registered there. Of course, Sons and Daughters United is registered there. They donate about, I think it's 0.5% or something of all of your purchases back to the organization. So that's really fun and easy way to do it with ways that you're already spending for the holiday season. Make sure that you are looking at your favorite organizations' Facebooks, and make sure that if you can donate on there, that you do so. Facebook doesn't charge any processing fees, so that makes it nice and easy. This is also a great way to get tax deductible donation or tax deductions for. I know that it's a big issue for a lot of my friends who have cannabis businesses and are running these businesses legitimately, and they have all this extra overhead and all this extra regulation. In addition to that, they can't write off literally anything, pretty much, due to 280E. With this, it's hard to find ways to really invest in employee services and healthcare and things like that, just based on the cost of that. But this is a great way to get a nice tax deduction and bring down your costs in that way. Give back. Feel free to visit our websites at greatlakesexpungementnetwork.org/donate to make a donation or donate on Facebook.
Attorney
Also,
Paul Young's just donated to Great Lakes Expungement
see?
Network.
Look at that.
Thank you. Appreciate it, man.
Every dollar counts. And so I don't want to be like Bernie Sanders, but like $2 is cool with me, It's also more than just Michigan-based cannabis companies. Think really hard and long about the companies and the organizations that have benefited you. Giving Tuesday is all about giving back, but also to your community as a whole. So if you look up Giving Tuesday all over social media, you'll see people doing cool, generous things, and it's something cool to get involved in. And there's still plenty of time left in the day. So I'm excited. I know that you've been working with the Michigan Freedom Coalition, and I'm sure that they're gearing up for Giving Tuesday as well, and that's another great spot.
Well, Redemption Foundation, of course, and there's a lot of cooperation, people working with each other, and Redemption Foundation definitely feeds that organization too.
Joe got his first expungement.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So expungements in Michigan are a lot different than what they used to be, but they're not perfect. But the goal now is to expunge the record, right? So the goal used to be you had to prove that not only were you no longer a criminal, but you were worthy of redemption. And the way that you prove that is that you had invested yourself in your community, in rehabilitation, in some ways. So you had to almost go to the point of sainthood to get an expungement. And you absolutely couldn't do it on your own. And a lot of judges there was no real barrier as to why they could deny it. The barriers were quite small. And now the overall goal is expungement. And what they're trying to prove is, hey, I committed a crime, and having this on my criminal record burdens me in this way. So it's pretty hard to find somebody who's not burdened by a criminal record. And so it makes the expungement process, we have people going in there to do the expungement, provided that they don't have other offenses in between, or that they're within that waiting period. The assumption is always that they'll get that expungement. So I'm really excited, at least for the eligible offenses. So I'm really excited to see a lot of our clients coming back with expunged records. This is their last holiday season with a record, or this is their first holiday season without one. And it's also crazy because we see a lot of people who had misdemeanor marijuana charges but pled them to something different, and then they had to go through a whole different process, and it was expensive, and it was difficult. But Jamie, can you tell us about the holiday drive and what we're doing on Friday?
I can. And this goes back now, I'm not sure how long, but the last few years. Sons and daughters.
6 years.
6 years, yeah.
6 years.
Sons and Daughters to identify families in different areas around the state, and gotten help with getting some funds so that they can then apply them for the family to have a great Christmas when they otherwise we're not going to have that because of their situation.
Yeah, so it's the holiday drive started with Jamie Fricke. She had this mission. She has the Thin Green Line. She wanted to provide gifts to people whose parents were either incarcerated for marijuana or were getting out of incarceration from marijuana charges. And the thing is that in 2010 when marijuana was, or in 2009 when marijuana was like legal, we really thought it was like super legal, right? We thought we could smoke weed at a park in front of a cop and flip, like that South Park episode, but it actually wasn't that way. And they started arresting people, and they arrested them in really high rates, and they like shot their dog and froze their accounts, and it was like this really hard time where we had no shortage of people that we knew personally that fit this criteria. So we organized to bring Christmas to them, and that's really where it arranged. From there, we've really worked to tie it with our Renee Wolf Memorial Grant, and anyone that knows Renee Wolf is 100% sure that she smoked that joint in the motherfucking legislator's room as big as her elbow or whatever. I don't know. But she's incredible. She had MS. She passed away. And we really made this in spirit of her. And what it does is it provides people with disabilities with one-time cash payments or one-time assistance per year for things like medical equipment, doctor visits, food, or housing. So what we do is we tie it with that grant, and we're buying a lot more than just gifts, right? So like we have a girl who's in her early 20s. She's a 3-year-old son. She has parking sense. She's sleeping in her couch right now because she has to sleep sitting up. So we're gonna buy her a hospital bed, but not one that she wants, like we're gonna buy her a queen size hospital bed so she can sleep in her room, in her bedroom, like a normal human being, right? And also her son doesn't have a bed, so we're gonna buy that as well. And when it goes from there, that doesn't mean that people are like, wow, Josey, that's a lot of money. Are you sure you want to continue to get like the gifts that are associated with? And this is not specifically for this man, but the idea is that the gift isn't the medical equipment, right? So it's just in addition to. And we're doing a lot of things. We have kids that have like braces that need special shoes, or we have children who are visually impaired. Or
just flesh that out for a second. Josey. So somebody's in medical need of something that, to help out the quality of their life or, their health or, many different things. And you're saying that we'll help to provide those things, but we don't consider that like the gift. You should get that
absolutely
baseline, and then get a gift that is something that you appreciate, that you get special, that you wouldn't otherwise get, that that all the special things about getting a gift.
Yes. So people with disabilities make people uncomfortable. It's true. It's so difficult to exist in most spaces, and when I'm the only person that looks like me in most areas. I've never seen anybody actively work. John Targowski, when I was 17 years old, was the first person that I'd ever seen working that was in a wheelchair. Then it was like
he was a lawyer and helped out a lot of cannabis cases.
He is a lawyer. He is.
He's in California now, working a lot of federal courts. And
he's a chef, and he used to be a prosecutor, I think, in Kalamazoo or something. He's amazing, and it was the first time I'd ever seen anybody that looked like me. Just like when I walked into that ASA meeting, and it was the first time I'd seen people that looked like me just existing in the world, that shared the same problems, and it was a moment for me, right? Like, and that's why I'm always like so big on the inclusion and the idea that people I have a different perspective of life with disability than somebody who is able-bodied or something like that. And the idea is that there really isn't programs that do this, right? If you want a specialty comb to comb your hair because you feel that it's necessary to comb your hair, it's like $34 or something crazy. But the insurance won't pay for it. And this is for like everybody. And this is something that we see consistently. And so the whole purpose of it is understanding that number one, living with disabilities is difficult, and it's expensive, and people making SSI payments make $9,000 a year. So what we did, which is typical in all of drug policy reform, and probably not a conversation for this, but what we did specifically in medical marijuana was use these people with disabilities, put them on a platform, but the purpose really was always to get to the next step, which was recreational. And so these people with disabilities were put in a complicated area where we were used as a platform that is no longer really valued, right, in the industry in terms of if you go to a cannabis facility, a provisioning center, it's no longer patients, obviously it's customers, and I always think that's weird, but whatever. And I think that the culture here has changed. And I also think that the access to this, because remember back in the day, if somebody needed like a walker, then we could crowd fund that quickly. I would just go down Cedar, up and down Cedar. There was like 106 freaking shops in Lansing. I would just go down Cedar and crowdfund whatever I needed, right? They were so willing and able to give, but also at that point, there was not really the overhead that we see now, right? And so in this regulated market, and I think in a lot of ways, it's difficult for people to find access to things like that. And I think we talked today about giving free marijuana out and how it would be impossible because people would abuse it, which I did not agree with, but that was Jamie's idea. And I just think that where do you see that it would be abused, right?
It's a donation. You may or may not,
But I mean, like, in terms of, there isn't really a way for patients to access. We used to team up with like black market cannabis companies when we first started this, and we used to provide like bags or like tinctures or whatever it was that would benefit them. And we had like kids that had seizures, so we took care of their medicine for months. And we can't really do that with the oversight that we see now. And also dispensaries can't do that either. They can't just give things away.
So and help people with dependency issues. And speaking of that, the Kalkaska Botanical Company is working with a program in that area, harm reduction, Michigan, and some researchers from Wayne State. I don't think it's giving it away because you can't do that. So there's some probably nominal amount paid, but providing a lot of the medicine for people with dependency issues so they can use cannabis as an exit therapy.
Where does the money go to? Like, where does the like stuff come from? Where do they source the product?
It's their products that are found on the retail shelves.
Oh.
And so there's diversity of things for people to try in that case. I mean, I have my testimonial in part is getting off opiates.
So you do.
And I found, I was able, because of the situation that I was in, was able to like use, many different products and types and forms and delivery methods and stuff. And I found some tinctures and some other things like to be really beneficial for me to help, get separated from that dependency. And to have a range of products like that is just, going to be, we think, kind of beneficial. So we're trying to help out with this study based on providing that.
What are they called? We can donate to them for Giving Tuesday.
Yeah. Harm Reduction, Michigan.
Wow. They do a bunch of good work.
There's this woman named Pam Lynch up there who, there's like 11 like satellite locations, somewhere like maybe, full on office, somewhere maybe an individual that kind of covers that area or something like that. But everybody has to have kind of been through this, so they have an understanding. it's a really intense and important organization. I mean, they go way beyond cannabis issues and stuff like that, obviously, but using cannabis as a harm reduction method for other for like serious dangerous dependencies.
That's like their main mission. It's like
No, it's not their main mission. No, they do do many things to help people out.
That's cool.
Yeah, just they're realizing, in fact, is helping out with this study and realizing that it seems to be, and again, I've seen it enough times to kind of believe it, but it's being looked at formally now by via research. And see what's concluded. It appears as though people can use cannabis to help exit away from dangerous substances.
Yeah, I think I've seen it for sure. And people use it for a variety of harm reduction tactics. I also think that sometimes people shame people who continue to use opiates or something like that are like, our community is kind of harsh on that. I just want to remind all my friends that it's not cool to tell your friends not to take their psych meds and to smoke CBD, because it doesn't work that way. But that's not what they're suggesting.
Sometimes cannabis just allows somebody to take maybe some less pain pills, but you still need them legitimately, and they work in certain ways. And so I mean, there's all that should be considered. It's not just right.
And not all opiate use is addictive.
Right.
And not all drug use is bad, but I think that essentially that's what they're saying at the Harm Reduction Project, and that's what they're saying with our friends in Grand Rapids at the Red Project. And what they do there is they do a lot of really cool, innovative stuff, right? So they do some like needle exchanges. There could be clean needles. There could be clean pipes, clean equipment. It's never good for the community to have something where you have people unknowingly or spreading germs or diseases, especially in or outside of a pandemic, right? And so the idea of providing these in a safe manner has been beneficial for 20 years, right? And I think they work directly with the Harm Reduction Project as well.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So one of the last meetings I had with Rebecca, one of the people really driving the program and trying to expand upon it and that kind of stuff. Moving the mic around a lot. Try to get them on here and some of the people involved and talk about this program a little bit. Just reminded me of it. But I think part of this point was, and kind of got off track a little bit, but part of it is that the people in need are there for a variety of reasons.
Right. And I think that in the cannabis community, we see it's a space that's not exclusively held by people who have been formerly incarcerated or who are disabled, but it is a space that a lot of us take up, right? And I think that we are especially sensitive or especially generous to these causes, and rightfully so. And I just hope that everybody goes and takes the time to donate. If you have a favorite organization or a favorite charity, make sure you do that. If you have a favorite dispensary, tell them to hit us up. We want to provide obviously tax-deductible donations, but also we are a local 501c3 nonprofit organization here in Michigan. We're providing expungements all across the state, and I think that the Great Lakes Expungement Network fits extremely well in a social equity plan, at least as a substitute or in addition to.
Some families or some connections between these associations could be getting help from a few of these different organizations.
It's true.
Somebody in the family might be getting help getting their licenses expunged, and people they know are getting some assistance with their holiday scenario. And I think this is the third year that Botanical Company
It is, yes. So Botanical
That's great.
Company is sponsoring one of our families this year. They're giving us a very hefty donation. They're super awesome. We're excited about that. But they do this every year, so it's not something that is new for them, or not something that we do a lot of really cool stuff here at Sons and Daughters, and we do a lot of weird, tragic shit. Like. We have a scholarship program for people with drug offenses. We have a program for people whose families are incarcerated to keep them connected. And then, of course, our disability grant. But none of it is really as fun as our holiday drive. And every year, Botanical Company, not only do they want to join in and help fund the show, but they also want to get involved in shopping for those families. And I think it's a fun way to get out there and to see cannabis companies doing good. I mean, I think that we benefit from that all the time. And I think in the space that we're in, sometimes we assume that people just enjoy the dispensary down the road or the 5 dispensaries on Front Street. But there is a constant reminder that nearly 40% of Michiganders did not, at least, vote for recreational marijuana. And so they need these constant reminders that not only does this facility bring in jobs, but they also bring in a variety of other services to the community. And the community benefits in a lot of ways. So I want to partner with as many people as possible across the state, but mostly here in my home of Southwest Michigan. So if you own a shop in Southwest Michigan, hit me up. I want to get together. So we have a lot of really great programs that run all year long, and we tie them together pretty nicely with our Christmas program. So if you have a loved one that's incarcerated, we help pay for things like travel expenses or JPay payments for communication or phone cards or whatever that is. And that's one of our highlights, or one of our requirements for the grant as well. So either you have somebody who's incarcerated, or you have somebody who is disabled or chronically ill. And that's because it ties into these other grants that we have at Sons and Daughters. So we're able to really give them the most that we can, the most magic. It's also a favorite of all of our friends in terms of like all of our donors, and most of our donations come during this time. The recall has been having people's money a lot tighter than it has in the last several years. So I have a $17,000 list. I have approximately $13,000 raised, a little bit under 13. So anyone that wants to shoot a donation, feel free to do so at sonsanddaughtersunited.org/donate, or shoot us a donation on Facebook. Also, feel free to donate to the Redemption Foundation, who we have partnered with this year to take this not only here in Southwest Michigan and in some of our biggest cities like Flint, Detroit, Lansing, but all over the state of Michigan for the first time ever. So I'm really excited about that. I'm thankful for Ryan and his reach and his ability, but also his compassion for the whole thing. And he just had that baby, so he's an extra softie. I'm excited about it. Thank you so much for having me on the show. Thanks for letting me talk about Sons and Daughters for an hour.
It's okay. Let's just go over some. Hopefully, Rick will come back on for a little bit, man. There he is. There he is. He's moving.
We'll see for how long. It's just been a nightmare trying to get online. So I'm very sorry to our viewers that had to put up with just Jamie this whole time.
It's been rough.
Josey makes it all worthwhile, though.
Yeah. So and actually, Paul and Bob both took up a lot of space and some great information. So it's all been working out. Although, of course, your inclusion would have made it a lot better. It's too bad. So we talked about Sons and Daughters United. Talked about Great Lakes Expungement Network, My Compassion, Redemption Foundation, Harm Reduction Michigan. Just to let people know, there's More Than Hope, Amy Carter's organization.
Oh yes, absolutely. Sorry.
Normal and ASA standards out there.
Can we talk about normal, Rick? It's Giving Tuesday. Tell us about how we can donate to normal.
Oh no. Oh, I saw a blink. You there? There he is. All right. What's going on with normal? How can people, if they want to support normal?
So, yeah, while I got a second here, December 6th, we're having a big December 6th big event at Cannabis Council, anniversary of legalization. It's a big party to celebrate. It's also a fundraiser for normal. You can meet most of the board members. A lot of them will be there, and you'll be able to talk to us about what's going on and what we're doing. We're still waiting to have an opportunity to participate in another poll question with Epic MRA. They just
I think Brian's referring to becoming a lifetime member of normal, and Rick was talking about normal has consistently over the years been involved in some polling.
dodging bullets.
There he is. Came back at dodging bullets. Went away. You started talking about the polling, and then you came back at dodging bullets. So, but I was saying that normal has consistently been involved with this polling question. We've seen like the support for cannabis, via the data that they've put out a question or two every couple of years increase. There's an opportunity probably to contradict some of the things that some of the big money interests are trying to say. I'm just trying to guess some of the stuff that Rick was saying. So fundraiser at 2930 East Jefferson for Cannabis Council is on December 6th. And that's also a celebration of the day that legalization went into effect in 2018. So this would be 18 plus 3 is 21. If that's confirmed. There wasn't one last year. No, we did something online last year. It was actually pretty cool. I remember that now. It was like a Zoom thing. So it was hosted by Normal, and there's a lot of people on it. We were discussing how happy we were that was the second anniversary, and that was a cool one. But the year before that, 2 years before that, we were in so this is the fourth one. In 18 and 19, we were at the Cannabis Council. Last year was on Zoom, and this year, I guess I'll be back at the Cannabis Council.
Do you remember the goat at the first one?
I do. That guy either does still live around here, which I'm not sure, or used to, where a few blocks away from where I am now.
I was so mad.
Well, just for to set part of the scene of why there'd be the
part of the scene.
Goat shit, and if there's a goat around, there's going to be some goat shit around. That's all there is to it, and you can deal with it.
It was on he was on like the front page of MLive for a totally different event with the goat too.
Yeah, and that guy unfortunately was beaten up by a bunch of people, and he's not necessarily considered to be grounded. He may have moved. I don't know what's going on, but I hope he's okay, basically. But he picked up like some of the goat poop that people had issues.
Anybody that brings a goat to a party is a cool dude in my book. I'm here for it.
He picked up the poop with his hands, and some people thought that was
There's great content for it. So,
so another good organization, the John Sinclair Foundation.
Oh yes,
we are having the 50th anniversary of the John Sinclair Freedom Rally. Last night on Medical Mondays, Adam discussed the history there a little bit more. But there was a time when there was a harsh reaction to the ridiculous sentence of John getting 10 years in prison for passing 2 joints. And a rally was held in big time names and musicians. John Lennon, Yoko Ono, Bob Seger, Steve Wonder.
This is something that John orchestrated with his with Lenny, and Lenny did a lot of work on the outside as well. And I think that when we talk about the John Sinclair Freedom Rally. It really doesn't. The pictures and the history behind it really is so strong and so Michigan. And Michigan has always been on the forefront of drug policy reform. And I think it's so 50 years? The 50th?
Yes, it's 50th anniversary of that event.
That's crazy.
And that's why he wanted to do something. It's kind of doing it a little bit later on. It's a small venue and limited number of people coming there just because of the pandemic, and to keep it a little bit more respectful, some space and stuff like that. But some great performances, recognition of this event. There'll be a couple bucks hopefully raised for John Sinclair Foundation, and looking forward to that. Otherwise, there are ways for people to support it. You can go. There'll be the link spun around for this event, and on there is seats, or the tickets are probably going to go relatively quickly because there's not going to be that many of them, but there is an opportunity to donate on there if that's the case. So hopefully some people will help to preserve John's legacy, because it's really important. It's foundational to a lot of the change that we've been able to experience.
It is. It's on the forefront. I wish that Adam was here to say it is the largest unadvertised event in Michigan.
Yeah.
Although, I think that Hash Mash has taken on a whole new role on its own. I'm excited. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for talking about Glenn. We're having a telethon. I don't know. It's on December 15th for the Redemption Foundation and for the Great Lakes Expungement Network, and with Jazz Cabbage, right?
Did we discuss this, or are you asking me right now?
No, that's what I that's what I heard. I heard that there was a fundraising thing that was going on for the Redemption Foundation and for Glenn. On December 15th. So I guess
That's possible. It's a Wednesday.
I heard about it.
Special telethon broadcast, maybe. It's not out of the question.
It seems reliable. And
it'll work out. So what I don't think we got to, spun around it a little bit, but on Friday there's actually going to be a get together of supporters of the sons and daughters holiday help for families, and some of the shopping and preparation and all that kind of stuff is going to be going down.
If you want to shop and wrap, hit me up. We're doing a group shopping day in Lansing, meeting at 10 a.m., 920 North Washington. The new office for the Redemption Foundation and for Covert Law, just like 2 blocks down from the old office, so it's easy to find. Right there in Old Town.
Right on. So, anything else you want to get to, Josey? Because
I have talked for so long, Jamie. I'm trying so hard.
Well, we have some space here. Rick's not here. He fills in a lot of volume.
He does take up space for sure.
Yeah.
But I think that it is getting time for the end of the holiday season. Every year between December 26th and New Year's, I do articles on corporations and preps for people who want to start a 501c3. If you are practicing in a gray area for your nonprofit and you want to do a 501c3, I will help you prep your paperwork for free for these 4 days. I do this every year. I am working right now with the Michael Clemency Project to get them registered and as a foundation and the ability to accept donations in the volume that they deserve to do that.
Okay, so what you said was, because it was kind of fast, the Michael Thompson Clemency Project.
Yes. So,
And that's the guy who was finally freed after serving about 25 years with a 40-year sentence for minor cannabis activity ultimately.
yes.
And,
So Nico Thompson's story is tragic. So he is a guy who got a NAACP award for being activist of the year back in the 70s, and just a couple in his he's been prominent in the community, and he one of his buddies had asked him to get, like, I don't know, like a quarter pound of weed or something. And so he was like, sure, man, I can get it for you, but I need the money because I can't, I don't fucking have that shit. So then he was actually an informant. So the cops followed him going from where the informant was at the place where he had asked about the weed to a different house, picking up the marijuana, and then going back to meet the informant. From there, they arrested him, and he had no weapons on him. He had just the marijuana that they had followed him to get from somebody else's house, and then followed him back to deliver. At no time did he go back to his home. On the other side of town, at his house, even though they were following him, they raided his home at midnight. When they did so, this is, of course, in Flint. So when they did so, his wife was there. She was alone. She hadn't talked to Miko. There was no cell phones. She had no idea where Miko or Michael had been, right? No idea where he was. No idea that he had been arrested. No idea that he had made this deal or anything like that. So she goes to the door. She gets arrested. They come in. They find a gun underneath the bed. She says, hey, that's my gun. My fucking husband's not here. I'm scared shitless. I'm a woman living, but I'm here by myself. That's my gun. It's not his gun. Miko at no time went back to his house. They were under surveillance. He at no time had time to put his gun away. Moral of the story is, and of course there was no weed in the gun when the weed were not together, right? He didn't go back and get the weed at any time. But they hit him with a gun charge. So it is more
that's what happened to Michael Thompson.
Yeah, that's who it is. That's Miko Thompson. That's the same guy. That's Michael Thompson. That's the exact story. So, so the idea that it's just a weed thing is true, but what it is more than that is it's a blatant example of systematic racism in the way that it exists, and specifically in the cannabis industry and in the cannabis community, and cannabis culture. People who consume marijuana are more likely to be persecuted if they're black or brown, and that's statistically proven for decades, right? And so I think that is the sole reason that they were able to connect him to something like that. I don't think that it was a weed thing necessarily. I don't think it was a gun thing at all. I think that it was a systematic approach to keeping a black man in prison for 40 years. But he's out now and he's doing cool shit. And if you follow him on Instagram, you will not regret it.
It's good stuff. And I'll just say that, I know some of the other people involved. It's kind of like the Clean Smoke Initiative is an offshoot of the Cannabis Freedom Coalition. So is this organization. And Mike McCurdy is involved. And the group has had a really hard time working with the governor, trying to get some action rolling with some clemency, scenarios. But Michael Thompson and this organization, and Michael Thompson at the lead, wanting to have these discussions, is getting more action than what was going on before. So this is an important organization.
It's important to note, just like our friend Jeff from Missouri, who was in prison for 20 years for marijuana, right? the change in the condition of the prisons between the time when they first got in there and today, after things have been privatized and switched companies, and the way that things have been really unregulated, or at least not regulated and with human rights in mind or valued. So that's
It's rough.
about
It's
a
rough.
lot.
And you can hear that message whenever Michael speaks. He was in there.
All right, go donate to Sons and
Understand
Daughters
something
right now. I heard that.
Sons and Daughters United.org. It is 6 o'clock. Somehow we got there mainly without Rick. He really was persistent throughout the show, trying to get on whenever he possibly could. He was
I
here.
feel like that's an accurate description, with or without context.
Anyway, we'll try to shore that up for next week. I apologize for Rick's absence. You stepped up, though, as Jen points out, and carried the show. Before that, Paul and Bob had some great stuff to say, and I appreciate
I
that.
love Bob. He's the
Yep.
shit.
We'll have him back on.
Paul
And,
Tylenda's the goat. Go hire him. He's the best.
he is.
All right, thank you. Go
All
donate
right.
to Sons and Daughters. It's awesome. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, everybody. I apologize for the weirdness of the show, but there's a lot of good stuff. Difference of the shows, a lot of good stuff nonetheless. And we'll be back next week, hopefully with better, more consistent results. But thank you, Josey. And that's really a lot of profound shit. We sit here and talk about it.
Profound
Like
shit.
It's really, really improving the quality of people's lives is a huge thing. And a lot of people see that and appreciate it.
I appreciate this. I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad to talk about Sons and Daughters United the whole goddamn time, which is worth it. I think that that's so cool. Please go donate to your favorite organization. I am judging my friends based on who donates to Sons and Daughters.
Right on. Okay. See you guys. Jazz Cabbage Cafe. Bye. Thank you.